What if the greatest surprise isn't what you planned, but what you desperately tried to avoid? My architectural firm's big project got shelved, an unexpected snag in zoning laws, meaning my week-long business trip out of state was cut short. Instead of a bustling hotel conference, I was suddenly back in our quiet suburban home, 2 days earlier than planned. Rowan's meticulous itinerary for her spiritual cleanse upstate was still sitting on her study desk. Pages detailing yoga retreats, mindfulness workshops, and a promise to reconnect with the universe. I hadn't argued when she said she needed space. I never do. But the universe, it seems, has a particularly cruel sense of humor. The house was silent when I walked in, or so I thought, until I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Rowan's laughter. That sharp, breathy giggle she reserved for charming strangers, for the new barista with the elaborate sleeve tattoos, for anyone but me. The sound that always made me feel like an interloper in my own marriage, now echoed from behind our master bedroom door. I should have announced my presence, or simply turned and walked away. But I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed, listening. "He doesn't even ask anymore," she said, her voice a mix of amusement and a cutting contempt. "He just nods like some docile house pet." Another peal of laughter. Then a man's low, self-satisfied chuckle, muffled by the solid oak door, yet clear enough to turn my bones to ice. I retreated slowly, a strange, hollow calm settling over me. No panic, no immediate surge of rage. It was an eerie sensation, as if my mind had been silently bracing for this very moment long before my conscious self allowed it. She wasn't supposed to be home either. Yet there she was, not in some rustic cabin, not communing with nature by a serene lake, but in our bed with someone else. All on a very weekend, she claimed she needed to heal her soul. I didn't burst in. I didn't shout. I didn't collapse. I simply turned, walked out the front door like a ghost, taking care not to make a sound, and sat in my car for 3 agonizing hours. I just sat there, trying to piece together if Sebastian Stone, the man I thought I was, still existed. That night, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I stared at the stained ceiling of a nameless roadside inn, wondering how many times her laughter had filled closed rooms I never dared to open. How many phantom retreats she'd needed to escape the man she'd once pledged forever to. I was never supposed to be home, but now that I was, something fundamental within me had irrevocably shifted. And by the time the first rays of dawn pierced the motel room curtains, I knew she wasn't coming back to the man she'd left behind, because that man no longer existed. I couldn't return to our house. It felt alien, tainted. I drove aimlessly for hours, the echo of her voice still looping in my mind, as if sheer movement could somehow undo the witness of my own betrayal. Her laughter played on a loop, cruel, intimate, carelessly abandoned. It wasn't just a breach of trust, it was a calculated performance. She had played a role for months, perhaps years, and I, the devoted fool, had applauded from the front row. I pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner somewhere off Highway 7. The kind of place where the neon sign flickered erratically and the coffee tasted like a burnt offering. I sat there until sunrise, scribbling fragments into a forgotten notebook from beneath the passenger seat. Not poetry, not a letter, just raw, disjointed thoughts. Questions I couldn't ask her. Sentences I couldn't finish. One line kept repeating, "If she's truly happy without me, was she ever truly happy with me?" I didn't call her, didn't text. I knew she'd eventually send some flimsy excuse once she realized her little lie had finally sprouted teeth. But I wasn't going to grant her the satisfaction of my anger. That would have meant she still held a piece of me. And after everything, a painful truth dawned. I didn't even know what part of me was truly mine anymore. The next secluded and I checked into reeked of stale bleach and old secrets. The clerk, a man with weary eyes, gave me a look that suggested he knew I wasn't there for business or pleasure, merely to hide. I lay on a mattress, still fully clothed, fixated on a hairline crack in the ceiling. And then it hit me. She hadn't said, "I love you," before she left. Not even a lazy, over-the-shoulder goodbye. Nothing. Just a fleeting smile and a zipped travel bag. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't hesitated. She had chosen not to. That realization didn't sting. It hollowed me, as if someone had scooped the air from my chest, leaving only dust. The following morning, I did something I had never done in our entire marriage. I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from her. Didn't want her carefully constructed lies cluttering my notifications. I craved silence. Real silence. Not the kind I used to endure while she scrolled through social media beside me in bed, laughing at reels she never shared. Later that day, from a public library computer, I checked my email. I don't know why I bothered. Old habit, perhaps. That's when I saw it. A calendar invite sent from her corporate account. Dinner with Callum Clark. 7 p.m. The Obsidian Grill. Callum. The name from the email. It wasn't a coincidence. It was undeniable confirmation. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. The sheer audacity of using her work calendar to book a romantic dinner while pretending to find herself in the wilderness. I wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, but I just stared at the screen, blinking slowly, while a child next to me watched cartoons at full volume. She wasn't careful because she believed I'd never check, because she assumed I'd stay and wait. But for the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I was deciding. Here's what no one tells you about betrayal. It gives you an impossible clarity. And by the time she came home, something final would be waiting for her. She had left to find herself, but she had left her shadows behind. And I had finally stepped out of them. The Obsidian Grill wasn't far from the library. I didn't know what propelled me there. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was more like an urgent need for observation, a scholarly interest, as if I had been handed the script to a play I'd never auditioned for, and decided to sit front row just to witness how truly bad it would hurt. I arrived half an hour early and parked across the street. Engine off, heart pounding, watching strangers move in and out like background actors in someone else's story. Then I saw her. Rowan stepped out of a sleek gray sedan, wearing the vermilion coat I'd bought her last Christmas. The same coat she claimed she hated because it was too much. And yet, here she was, wearing it for him. She stood by the entrance, meticulously checking her reflection in the glass door, fluffing her fiery hair the way she used to when she still cared how I looked at her. Then he arrived. Callum Clark, taller than me, clean-shaven, exuding confidence in that effortless, almost smug way. They hugged, not awkwardly, not cautiously, but with the familiarity of a long-established routine. This, it seemed, was home now. They went inside. I didn't follow. Not at first. Instead, I stared at my shaking hands on the steering wheel, trying to breathe through what felt like the final nail in the coffin of the life I thought was real. I could have driven away, could have spared myself, but something deep inside insisted I needed to see it, not to confront, not to explode, but simply to make it undeniable. Ready to learn the shocking truth? Sometimes you have to watch your world burn to believe it was ever on fire. 15 minutes later, I walked in. Nobody noticed me at first. The hostess smiled, seating me at a discreet table near the window, 2 spots behind theirs. They didn't see me, or perhaps they chose not to. Rowan was leaned in close, her hand resting lightly on Callum's wrist, laughing again with that same distinct sound. But now it wasn't just painful. It was insulting, because I saw it for what it truly was, a performance of intimacy, just loud enough to convince herself she had already moved on. She hadn't even left a note at home. No message, no glimmer of guilt. She had erased me before she even zipped up her travel bag. I watched as Callum whispered something, and Rowan laughed so hard she covered her mouth. She looked younger than she had in years. Not from genuine joy, I realized, but from the liberation of finally dropping the pretense. I didn't order food. I just sat there, invisible, watching the person I once loved transform into someone utterly unrecognizable. Every second felt like a dagger. Not because she was happy, but because she had chosen to be happy without even the courtesy of telling me she'd stopped trying. After 20 minutes, I stood up. Not to cause a scene, not to utter a single word. I walked past their table slowly, deliberately, and just as I passed, she glanced up and our eyes locked. For a second, the entire world froze. The blood drained from her face. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly. Callum looked confused, like he was witnessing a strange drama unfold that had nothing to do with him. I didn't break stride. I didn't blink. I just kept walking straight out the door, as if she were nothing more than a stranger I used to know. In 7 seconds, her carefully constructed world shattered, and I felt nothing but an eerie calm. Back in my car, my hands weren't shaking anymore. She thought I'd stay and wait. but I had already left her behind, and now she knew it. I don't know what kind of man she expected to find waiting at home, with puppy eyes and a box of tissues. But whatever version of Sebastian she imagined, he was long gone. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even want to. I booked another cheap motel, one town over, and lay awake staring at a crack in the ceiling that looked precisely like a lightning bolt. It felt fitting. Everything was split now. Me, her, the truth. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. 7 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 2 texts. Sebastian, I don't know what you think you saw. Please don't jump to conclusions. Can we talk? I need to explain, please. It was the first time she'd addressed me by name in days. Not babe, not hun, just Sebastian, cold, measured, like a lawyer trying to convince a judge she wasn't guilty of a crime that had played out in full view. The voicemail was worse. Her voice was shaky, falsely wounded, the kind of tone someone uses when they're not actually sorry, just caught. If you had told me you were coming back early, I would have, I don't know, prepared you. It's not what it looked like. Okay, Callum is just, he's a friend. A complicated friend. Please don't shut down on me. I need to talk to you. Her words felt like poison, each syllable twisting the knife. Prepare me. Prepare me for what? To discover that while I was losing sleep, second-guessing every flaw in our marriage, she was playing house with someone who apparently had dinner reservations on speed dial? I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. Instead, I drove to our house and parked across the street. I watched the windows like a stranger casing his own life. The living room curtains were still open. The lights were on. She was there, alone, pacing, clutching her phone, occasionally peeking out the window as if she could will me to appear. I didn't move. I wanted her to sit in the discomfort in the not knowing. I wanted her to taste the same bewildering confusion I'd swallowed every night for the past year, while she drifted further and further away, never saying why. Then I saw it the moment she crumbled. She sank onto the couch, pulled her knees to her chest, and started crying in her sleeve like a teenager who'd been dumped before prom. And still I felt nothing. No pity, no surge of anger, just this strange, unfamiliar calm. Why finding someone else's pain offer me nothing but peace? I stayed another hour, then drove away without ever knocking. The next day, she left another message. I can't sleep. You won't talk to me. I'm losing my mind. Sebastian, please come home. But what she didn't realize is I had, just not to the home she meant. The real home, now, was the version of myself she left behind when she chose lies over love. And I wasn't about to hand him back to her. I didn't plan to go inside. I just wanted to grab a few essentials. My passport, some old journals, the charger I always forgot. It was meant to be a quiet visit, a surgical removal of necessities before disappearing again. But as fate would have it, the front door was unlocked. That alone spoke volumes. She wasn't even being careful anymore. It was as if she wanted to be found. Or perhaps she assumed I'd come crawling back, and we'd have our grand reconciliation monologue right there in the hallway. But I wasn't giving her that. I wasn't giving her me. The house looked different. Or perhaps I did. The throw pillows were arranged with showroom precision. Candles flickered, scented with pine and citrus, the very kind she used on our 3rd anniversary, when we stayed in that overpriced cabin and actually laughed together. 2 wine glasses sat on the kitchen counter, still wet, still fresh. No hiding it this time. She was upstairs. I heard the soft thud of footsteps, hesitant, as if she sensed something was coming, but couldn't pinpoint the direction of the hit. I didn't wait. I walked straight to the dining table, pulled a blank notepad from the drawer, and wrote 3 terse lines. Rowan, you said you needed space. I gave you the whole universe. Enjoy it. Sebastian. Then I took off my wedding ring and placed it neatly on top of the note, pressing it down like a paperweight made of shattered dreams. And then, just as I was about to walk out, I heard her voice from the stairs. Quiet, uncertain. Sebastian. I didn't turn around. I kept my back to her, hand on the doorknob, my heart strangely tranquil. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. Please, can we just sit down and talk like people who used to love each other? That phrase, used to, rang louder than anything else. She didn't even hear herself. Or maybe she did. Perhaps that was the true confession she'd been holding in. I finally turned. She was standing 3 steps from the bottom, barefoot, wearing the old college sweatshirt she always stole from my drawer when she sought comfort. But it didn't work on me anymore. None of it did. I looked at her like a stranger. A stranger who wore my last name like a costume. There's no talk, Rowan. There's only what happened. And you happened, I said calmly, as if stating a weather report. She started crying again, those silent, shaking tears that used to break me. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I opened the door and stepped outside into the cold, crisp air. And I didn't look back. Stop. Recognize when a conversation is over, and walk away. She thought I'd stay. She thought I'd wait. She thought I'd listen. But I had given her everything, even my silence. And all she gave me was the sound of her own footsteps walking away from who we were. This time, the only one walking away was me. 2 days passed before the narrative began to shift. At first, I thought she'd sit in the silence like I had for months, unravel, reflect, perhaps even feel the weight of what she'd done. But no, Rowan wasn't the type to carry blame. She was the type to hand it off, dress it up, and ensure everyone applauded when she played the victim. The first sign was a text from her cousin, Mara Cole, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Hey, I'm really sorry things are rough. Rowan told me you left without saying a word, that you didn't even explain. I stared at that message, stunned. No mention of her weekend getaway with Callum. No mention of her laughter in my absence. No mention of how she never once checked if I was okay. Just me. Suddenly the villain in a story I didn't write. 99% of people don't understand how quickly a narrative can flip when convenient. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. What was the point? The people she chose to believe her were not people I needed in my life anymore. Let them have their theater. I was done performing. That night, I found myself at a dimly lit pub I hadn't visited since my bachelor party. A dusty little dive called the Rusty Anchor. The bartender, Fane Thorne, still remembered my name, even though I barely recognized the man in the mirror behind the liquor shelf. You look like a man who saw the edge, he said, sliding a whiskey toward me, and decided not to jump. I didn't correct him. Instead, I told him everything, not for validation, not even for comfort, just to say it out loud, to hear the words outside of my own head. He listened, nodded, and poured another glass without a word. Somewhere between the second and third drink, he asked, "You think she regrets it?" I thought about it for a long time. No, I finally answered. I think she regrets getting caught. That's not the same thing. Why failure is the key to success. Learning the difference between regret and being caught. When I left the pub, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Rowan. I don't know what story you're telling people, but it's not fair to make me look like the bad guy. That was the moment I truly realized she hadn't cried because she hurt me. She cried because she was afraid of how she'd look. I never replied. Instead, I sent a single photo. The note I left on the table with the ring still on top, untouched, exactly where I had placed it. No words, just proof. She saw it, left it on read, and never responded. By the weekend, I heard from my old friend, Elias Evans, one of the few people who ever truly saw me. He invited me to stay at his remote cabin near Lake Serenity for a while. Said it was quiet, isolated, and surrounded by trees that didn't care who hurt who. I said yes without hesitation. And on the drive out of town, as the roads narrowed and cell service vanished, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not closure, not forgiveness, just space. And for the first time it was mine. I was 3 days into the quiet when the knock came. Lake Serenity had always been a place people forgot. Tucked behind thick woods and foggy mornings, it possessed an eerie, healing silence, as if the very air knew how to hold secrets. I hadn't seen another soul since Elias handed me the keys and left me with a handshake that spoke more than words. No texts, no calls, just books, the sound of the wind scraping against the old windows, and me finally learning how to be alone without feeling empty. Then came the knock. 3 short raps. Hesitant. My stomach dropped before my feet even moved. I opened the door, and there she was. Rowan. Her fiery hair pulled into a messy knot. Her jacket too thin for the crisp autumn air. Mascara smudged, as if she'd cried or hadn't slept. Maybe both. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice low, almost ashamed. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She walked in like she didn't remember how small the world could feel when you weren't lying. Her eyes scanned the rustic room, the stone fireplace, the books stacked in uneven towers, the half-finished journal on the armchair, and then landed on me. "You left," she said, as if it were breaking news. "I didn't disappear, Rowan. You just didn't notice when I was still there." That made her flinch. Good. She sat down without asking, as if she still owned the right to simply exist in my space. "You're really done, aren't you?" I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I just stared. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. "I filed the divorce papers. You'll be served next week officially." I thought you should know it's coming." I blinked slowly. "You drove 3 hours to tell me that in person?" "No," she said, her voice cracking. "I drove 3 hours because I thought if I saw your face one more time, maybe I'd understand how I let it all go so easily." I should have felt something. Rage, sadness, perhaps even pity, but all I felt was distance. We were in the same room, yet miles apart. She stood, took a step closer. "Do you remember that night after your mom's funeral? How I held your hand while you couldn't stop shaking? You said I was your anchor." I remembered, and that's what made it worse. "Yeah," I said, "and anchors drag you down too, don't they? How spending money can make you richer by investing in your freedom, even if it costs everything else." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes were red, not from the cold, but from the realization that the door behind her was now more open than the emotional chasm between us. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know when I stopped being enough for myself, so I blamed you." I didn't need her to say that, but a part of me still appreciated hearing it, even if it was years too late. She placed the paper on the table, turned slowly, and walked to the door. "Goodbye, Sebastian," she said, soft and sincere. This time, I didn't just let her walk away. I wanted her to. And when the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled so deeply it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole, but I was finally free. A breath so deep, it felt like reclaiming years of lost air. Rowan didn't reach out again after that. No more texts. No more surprise knocks. No follow-up to the divorce papers she'd left on the table that night. Maybe she finally realized it wasn't just a relationship that ended. It was the illusion that we were still anything more than two people clinging to shared memories that no longer held the same meaning. I stayed at the lake for another week. I chopped wood, burned through half the journal, cooked the same 3 simple meals, and watched fog roll across the water like it was trying to teach me something profound. Silence became less threatening. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped needing to. Elias came by on the final day, brought coffee and that half grin he always wore when he knew something I didn't. "You look lighter," he said. I didn't know if he meant my face or the bags under my eyes, or the simple fact that I had finally left behind the man who once begged for breadcrumbs of love and called it a meal. Back in town, I signed the divorce papers without hesitation. The woman behind the counter offered a sympathetic look. I didn't need it. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. Because somewhere between her walking out and me choosing not to follow, I figured it out. I never lost her. I lost myself trying to hold on to someone who had already let go. And now, for the first time in years, I wasn't picking up pieces. I was starting from scratch with my own hands, my own rules, and a heart that no longer confused pain for love. Ready to reclaim your own story? Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the most powerful thing you'll ever do.